We'll get started in a minute. We're just settling in here. There's still some folks coming in the door, so I'm going to leave us muted until we get started. Get started. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am going to close this. If you see anything pop up of somebody trying to come in, please let me know. So my name is Amanda Gordon. I moved to town about 4 years ago. I am currently a member of the Bolton Democratic Town Committee, the Board of Finance, and I was the prior chair of the Ad hoc Bolton Diversity Commission. And so civic engagement and getting involved is near and dear to my heart. So when we talked at the DTC and with the RTC about throwing this event together, I thought it would be a good idea. And I heard everybody used to do it in town. So hopefully bringing something back that we can make a regular occurrence. Can the folks that are joining us online hear us okay? All right, I'm getting a thumbs up from Cheryl, so that's great. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the event, and then I'm going to turn it over to our DTC and RTC chair to do introductions as well. So the format of this evening is we're going to get our introductions from the Republican and Democratic Town Chair Committee, and then each commission is going to have about 5 minutes each to share with you a little bit about themselves and the responsibilities of their committee and what their committee or board does. I am going to ask that you guys hold all questions that you have until the end of the event. You guys have cards on your chair. So if you do think of a question in the middle, please feel free to write it down. We'll be passing a bucket at the end and you can put the questions in there. As the moderator, I will be reading the questions out loud just to make sure that our friends that are joining us virtually are able to hear us, because sometimes when we have audience participation, it is very hard to hear from the back. Are there any questions from the audience off the bat? Any concerns? All right, then I will get started. And I believe Rodney is kicking us off, who is the chair of our Republican Town Committee. I am going to ask if you guys can come stand up here close to the owl so that the microphone can pick you up and you can face the audience and they'll see you.
And the owl sees my back. Right?
You can come stand over here. You want to come stand over here?
If you face the owl, it sees your face.
Sorry, we've got a lot of panelists over here, and we're trying to make room.
Just scoot over.
Watch your eyes, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't go too far, you
All
get
right.
blinded.
So thank you, everybody, for coming. Hopefully this is a great event and we'll come up with boatloads of candidates. I'm Rod Fournier. I'm the chairman of the Republicans. I've been chairman for 10 years or something like that. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And for our committee members, for our Republican representatives, I got Bob Mora as representative. Bernice Dixon is our Register of Voters. Andrew Brunel is our Board of Ed chairman. And who else do we have? Denise. Ross Lally. He's on the
Chair of Inland Wetlands, Deputy Republican Registrar, and Chair of Board of Finance.
Okay, yeah, he plays several roles. Tom Crockett is an alternate on the Board of Ed, Planning and Zoning, and Denise is, Danielle is on the Wetlands Commission. Diane is on the Wetlands Commission. Okay. So we're represented by these people tonight, and hopefully we can answer your questions.
Thank you. All right, and now I will have Mr. John Toomey come up. He is the acting current chair of the Bolton Democrats.
Right there. There when the gym closed. Hi. I'm John Toomey, I'm Chair of the Bolton Democrats. The one thing I'd like to say is there's three of us in the room that had a great history teacher here in Bolton. One of the best educations I think we could have had. Bobby and Bernice and I had Mrs. Heller, and one of the things she taught us was it's your duty to be an informed citizen. And she taught us parts of the Constitution. We had to recite the Gettysburg Address. We got a good foundation in what America was and is. But I think this is a great event. I'm glad that Amanda has brought this to fruition. We need to do more of this kind of open dialogue so that there aren't misunderstandings. And I'm glad we're not talking about issues. We're talking about how the process works. We have Ann Decker, a member of a chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I miss being on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Alon Gordon, Planning and Zoning. Rhea Klein is on the Board of Education. Amanda was on the Board of Finance for the very short period of time between now and November. Adam was the former chair of the, Adam Toll was the former chair of the Planning and Zoning, is now a selectman. Kristen Gorley is on the Board of Finance till November. And what did I miss?
Alan's on the Conservation Commission. Alan Bicknell's on the Conservation
thank you.
Commission.
And Marilee is on the, I should know this. I know I should
I'm not
know
on
this.
the board right now.
Just taking a hiatus.
Former member.
Planning and
Well,
zoning.
you can get credit for that. I'm a former member of the Board of Finance myself. And I trust that you folks can come up with good questions to ask each of the candidate, each of the office holders on how the whole process works. And we can save issues for another day. We have from end of July to November 7th to discuss issues. But let's talk about how Bolton works.
Thank you, Rodney and John, for kicking us off. So as John mentioned, this event really is informational. It is a nonpartisan event, so there will be no partisan politics here tonight. The goal is for you guys to start to understand or ask questions about how the boards and commissions work, maybe how they make their decisions, what their processes are like, what they're responsible for. So any topics of issues like affordable housing or stop signs on the road, those are things that you would take to the actual commissions. And our hope is that maybe by listening to this presentation tonight, that you'll figure out which of those boards you bring your issues to. So that's the goal of the event tonight. And if I do get any questions that I believe are issue related questions, I do reserve the right not to ask them. Any of our panelists may be able to hang out after the event and they may be able to answer your questions or point you in the right direction, but we do want to make sure that we stay on topic tonight. So we are going to kick it off with the Board of Selectmen. Tonight we have three members of our Board of Selectmen, Adam Teller, Bob DiPietro, who's in our audience, and Bobby Mora, who are here to share a little bit about what the Board of Selectmen does. So any of you take it away.
I'll let the junior member of our board take it.
It's pretty sad that I'm the junior. So just to sort of start with a framework, which is that Bolton has a document called the Charter. We actually voted on revisions in a recent election. Every 10 years, the charter is reviewed and may be amended, and it's essentially the constitution for the town. Almost every board that's an elected board is created by the charter, and the duties and obligations of that board are set out in the charter. The exception is the Board of Education. There's one paragraph in the charter about the Board of Education. It basically says there'll be a Board of Education and its duties and operations are controlled almost entirely by state statute and in some cases by federal statutes. But for the Board of Selectmen, as I'm a member, we are on the one hand, the legislative body of the town, so that we have the ability to pass ordinances that are essentially laws for the town and are in some cases enforceable by criminal prosecution, and in others just tell people what they can and can't do. We also oversee the general town government. So that means that to the extent that any person is working for the town other than the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen is ultimately their supervisor. Indirectly, typically through the town administrator, but ultimately it's the Board of Selectmen that hires people, that decides what they're going to be paid, that decides what their rules for working are, and in general, what the rules for anything that's going to happen in town that isn't already covered by a state statute or by some federal law. We set the town budget for the town proper. That means your roads, your maintenance of your buildings, the things that this town owns. The Board of Selectmen is charged with keeping them in place, keeping them working, providing those facilities for members of the community, like a park or a playground, or a school for that matter, in terms of the buildings themselves. We don't operate the schools, but we create the buildings and all the facilities that are there. And that means we get the heat when taxes for those things go up, or when they're not maintained properly, or when things aren't going well. And that's our job. So you should feel free to contact us individually or as a group whenever things aren't going well, or when you think things are going well. If you know something that's going really well and you want to see more of it, tell us that. Thank you.
Bobby,
All right, well, that's why we have an attorney go first. That's a fine outline and we appreciate it. I'm gonna give a 2-second history. Unlike any other board, we were created back in the 1700s for a selectman. We're initially part of the government. And then when charter came in and we developed the town charter, we then could modify our form of government. As we did, we went from a 3 board initially to a 5 and now a 7. So that was all done through a legislative process, a lot of discussion, people saying, maybe, the workload is getting more difficult. We need to spread it out a little bit so more people can participate. And that was one of the initial moves from a 3 to a 5. And quite frankly, it's a part of the move to the 7-member board. Our board meets technically once a month. Well, obviously it meets a lot more than that, because we have subcommittees where the workload is spread out, things are reviewed and then brought forward to the full board to discuss. So and we tell our candidates, unfortunately, well, it's only 1 meeting a month. Well, most of you are a member of a board, probably have heard that song before. So it is not 1 meeting a month, it's a bit more. But once you become a part of that board, you find that, to do your job properly, that's what it takes. And that's how you go forward with it. First selectman is a bit different because a lot of what happens there starts there. When people have an issue, that's generally who they'll go to. They'll go to the first selectman and say, hey, how come this is this, or why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? They're more the point guard of the point of things happening on the board. Its involvement, the one thing about that position is how involved do you want to be, is how involved it becomes. If you're a sit back and let someone else do it, well, that's the way it is. If you're a person who's a hands-on person like myself, that'll never happen. You're into it, foot, hands, and full body. So it's up to you. Thank you.
thank you. I did forget to mention, if you could also please include, like Bobby alluded to, how much time the commission takes you each month, and maybe a brief snippet about why you got involved or why you're involved typically.
Oh,
So if you want to briefly respond to that.
as first selectman, I would say when I was probably using 20 hours a week. And that's a level of involvement. And some people of our who have been on that board before, were able to do it for less. And that's the difference. on how a chief executive operates. Some operate differently than others. That's my way of doing it. That's Pam's way, frankly, of doing it. And that's pretty much it. And it's not every week, it's not every day. There are weeks where no, it may be 5, 6, 10 hours, but there are weeks where you just going.
As a selectman, I would say it's probably, it ranges from maybe an average of an hour or 2 a week to maybe just a little bit more. There are some weeks where it's a little more because we have a meeting and you have to study and do some things for that and attend the meeting. But on an average, I don't think it's more than 2 or 3 hours a week for selectmen. And as for why I did it, I was raised to believe that when you're a member of a community, you pitch in and help. And this is one of the ways people can pitch in and help.
Great. Thank you so much. We are going to move on to the Board of Education. So if the Chair, Andrew Broneal, and Ann Decker can, oh, sorry, not Ann, Rhea Klein can come up. If you want to come up and stand behind us so that the.
If you like us, we'll move. We can come up here and
We're
sit.
going to be playing musical chairs,
Yeah,
so
that's better.
bear with us.
Make room, because we're gonna have others come up here.
All righty, it'll pick you up as soon as you start talking.
Rhea, would you like to, junior member?
Thank you.
I was the last minute.
Yeah.
So.
I'm the oldest member. I'm the junior member. But anyway, let me just start with why I got involved, and I would really recommend becoming involved with the town. Yes.
A little louder.
Louder, okay. Sorry. Just to get started, I got involved with the town because I have a neighbor, Arlene Fiano, who said to me, why don't you join the Bolton Heritage Farm Commission? And I said, oh, I got a little scared, even though I knew I wanted to help the town. And then from there, I was asked to run for the board. And I said, great. I was an educator for 42 years. And so I am very, thought I could lend my skill set to that position nicely. I would be a good fit. And I would say that generally we just, I mean, I belong to 2 committees. I'm on the finance committee and the curriculum committee. So there are subcommittees. So you may have 1 or 2 committees. They take a short period of time, maybe a half hour a month. And then the board meetings can be anywhere from, I'd say, an hour to like 3, but you know, the budget season is the heaviest part of the year for time, but it's very manageable, I think. And it's a wonderful group of people. We always work very collaboratively and cordially and seriously, and we all come prepared. And it's been a great experience. There's none of the horror show that you see on television. It's a wonderful group, and I've always been very proud and very comfortable being working with everybody. As Bobby said, it's very interesting because I was doing a little research, and it said, according to the National School Boards Association, that the local control of public education began in 1647. And when Massachusetts Bay Colony passed laws that required towns to establish and maintain schools. So that's pretty amazing. Okay, who serves? You have to be a resident. You have to have at least a high school education and a certificate of equivalency, or a certificate of equivalency. You can't have a criminal record, and a candidate must not be a current member of the government. Also, what we do basically is hire the superintendent, oversee the curriculum, the policies and regulations, make sure that we're complying with state rules and regulations. So those are the biggest issues. The Board of Education is responsible for about 2/3 of the budget, correct? So it is we do take that very seriously, and we have to also hear cases on students who are being expelled. So things like that. You might be called and asked if you can attend a meeting. And that's in a nutshell. And there's a really wonderful piece of informational pamphlet here that will help. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhea. That was very well put. Yeah, we largely were doing policies. We are sort of overseeing what the superintendent is doing. The superintendent brings a budget to us. That is definitely the most time consuming part of the year. A lot of Board of Finance meetings, but we vote on a budget. We send it to the Board of Finance, who will either approve our budget or cut a portion, which we have to go back and decide what cuts then to make. Other than that, the most time consuming things are contract negotiations. So we oversee or involved in teacher contract, administrative assistants, custodians, all the bargaining units. Those can be time consuming times to be on the board. That's personnel subcommittee. CAPA is capital allocation planning committee, takes up some time. That's how we collaborate with the town and decide what 1% of the town budget is to be spent on capital improvements. So we work on that at that December, January time. That gets wrapped up in the whole part of the budget, also brought to the Board of Finance. But other than that, it's Bob stole my one meeting a month line. And that was how a lot of people were told one meeting a month. And sometimes it's one meeting a month. Like, we don't have a meeting again until August, except a teacher negotiation meeting. But during February time, we are meeting, 3 times a month, plus subcommittees. So there are times where it's 6 hours a week or more, and there's times when it's, an hour a week. So it does vary greatly, and the time of year obviously very dependent. But as we also said, a lot of what we do is basically making sure that we're following the law. It all comes from the top. It comes from the federal government, it comes from the state government, and it's up to us to make sure the superintendent is making sure, and that's a lot of the policy changes we do. So I think we can make a difference in some areas, and a lot of areas that we're just trying to make sure the superintendent is running a good ship. So I can't think of anything else really.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We're going to play another game of musical chairs while I invite Ross Lally, Chair of the Board of Finance, up, and Kristen Gurley, who's a member of the Board of Finance. Over.
Good evening, everyone. I said, Kristen, I think I'm actually the junior member, even though I'm the chair. You were on board before I was.
No, we're on board at the same time. We could flip a coin for it.
All right.
I'm the junior member of the
You
Board
are
of
the
Finance.
junior member.
All right. Why don't you start?
Okay,
Or do you want me to?
I'll go ahead. and
Go ahead.
Yeah, you handed it over.
This is it's kind of an ensemble performance anyway on Board of Finance, so go for it. We can tag team it.
As you can see, we don't like each other at all. Actually, we get along beautifully on the Board of Finance, and I think that's been just such a pleasure with everyone who I've worked with. And I want to stress that we work together. And a couple of points that I'd like to make, and I'll start off first, why I ended up getting involved, and kind of a common theme here. I was raised with it. I had parents that, were always volunteering. They were always getting involved. So to me, it was very normal. When we moved to Bolton, there are just so many opportunities, which I think is such an incredible special gift to be able to walk into a town and be able to have an impact, hopefully a positive impact. So that's one thing I'd like to say for anybody who chooses to go for any board. So again, I wanted to match up, what my experience and education, where I could actually have a benefit. I have 2 business degrees, an undergraduate and an MBA. And I've worked for a large company, and Board of Finance seems to make a lot of sense for me. Now, what we do on the Board of Finance, I think there's a huge misconception When we are reviewing the budgets that are handed to us from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed, I think it's very important to state that we don't speak to any specific line item. We can either accept it or we can, say, hey, you're gonna have to return this and make a cut. And we'll state, the size of that cut. The only exception would be, because I also serve on the CAPA committee, that would be the only exception where you serve on that committee, you're working on capital expenses, and you're working with the rest of, members from the rest of the town to build up that budget. That would be the only time when you have an opportunity to speak to specific line items. So, but other than that, we ask in-depth questions. Somebody had described the Board of Finance as the financial conscience of the town, and I would have to say that that's an accurate description. I think that's very fair. But it takes a village, and it really has been a pleasure. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Russ.
Thank you. So I am Ross Lally. I have been in town about 13 and a half years now. And I got involved, my actually origin story goes to inland wetlands. And then the rest of how I got involved, I blame Pam Sawyer. She just has a way of recruiting people and getting them in and hooking them, and then it's too late. But, so such it was when I got on board with Board of Finance. I'd already been with inland wetlands. And I got involved because I want to give back, because of what I've gotten in my life. I feel I have done fairly well for myself, and I want to give back. And I will go back to what a couple other folks have said. I got involved because I just feel it's my duty as a citizen. I need to be involved, and that if I'm not involved, then I can complain, but I don't have as much of a right to, I should say. No, we all have rights, but it's like I just don't have my skin in the game when I complain if I'm not actively involved. And I would just say the other thing about all the committees I've been involved with, there really aren't any partisan politics involved. And I want to really stress that. And I want to ask people to pass that on, because a lot of young folks don't want to get involved because they see what goes on in the federal government and they see what goes on elsewhere. And so I will just say, we're looking for people to run in the fall when we change from a Board of Finance to the Finance Committee. And again, their responsibilities will be similar, which will be the watchdog over the budget, but that will consist of 2 selectmen, 2 representatives from Board of Education, 3 people elected at large from the community. So I'm trying to think anything else with Board of Finance. I guess this year we decided we would take a little bit more of an active role and get more involved with our banking partners, see if we could get, better interest rates compared to what, you're seeing elsewhere. And so we're also going to be working this summer, which we typically take July and August off to put together a transition plan, so that when the new Finance Committee comes on board in November, they will know what we consider priorities and they'll have some guidance. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you so much. So the next board or commission that we have up is Planning and Zoning. So I'm gonna invite up Kawan Gordon and the chair, Rodney Fournier. Not the chair, sorry, just another member. Chair of the RTC, but can't be chair of everything.
I think I'm a freshman, so.
Let's go right in there.
I don't even qualify for junior.
If you want me to go first. All right, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, my name is Juan Gordon. First, I want to say thank you for coming out tonight. For those that are online, while you partaking in this particular process, I think that shows that you have some level of interest. I think that bodes well for the town. So, as I stated earlier, I'm pretty much kind of a freshman. I moved to the town back in June of 2019. And it was shortly thereafter, I started to look into ways how I can become more involved in the town. I figured, move to the town, I'm investing time here, I'm looking to build my life, why not get involved? So an opportunity actually came up where a planning and zoning opportunity came up. Now, mind you, I did not have any prior planning and zoning experience. I didn't have any government experience, period. So green all the way around. But what I did have is I had, mentors, I had coaches, I had friends in my corner, which I was able to tap on and ask them certain questions like what's involved? How does this process work? And with that type of information, I moved forward. And I would say from my experience, my general perception on planning and zoning is my very first meeting, I was welcomed with open arms. I felt right away my thoughts and opinions were considered and taken to heart. And even the opinions and thoughts of others that I brought to the board were definitely considered, discussed and appropriately evaluated. And to me, that showed like a sense, like there's no really partisan motives. I think everybody on the board works very well. We listen to each other. We discuss things through and through, and we ultimately make decisions that I think are for the benefit of the town. One thing I will say is time-wise is always the ultimate question, like how much time does it take? In my experience, I put it this way, there's roughly about 730 hours in a month. And I say I spend maybe 3 to 4 hours a month on planning and zoning, and most of that consists of the actual meeting time. We meet generally once a month. In my experience, it may be a special meeting that may arise, but I haven't seen that come up too often. And with that, I will turn it over to Rodney for additional comments.
Hey, I like those 1 minute. Okay, so I've been on the planning and zoning for 2 terms. I was put on. I don't know why, I just ended up there. And so the planning and zoning basically has, when somebody comes in and wants to either build something or expand their facilities or make a development, it starts to go through the process of, first it goes through wetlands and then it goes through everything else. And when it gets to the planning and zoning, there's a book of rules that can and can't do, and the state has a tendency to like to tell you most of what you can and can't do. And they're trying to expand that. And so when it gets to us as the planning and zoning, we kind of make the decisions on what the good book says. And we have a little bit of leeway. So the black and white of the book is one thing, but then there's that gray area. And the options are to kind of change it a little bit. We can always change the rules if we want, if upon agreement with the board, with applications and everything else. And so it's up to the planning and zoning board to kind of direct the town where it's going to go. Do we want to just turn residential areas into commercial industrial areas? You can't really do it, but it would take a huge effort. So the whole picture of the town is kind of like painted by the planning and zoning board, and it's just kind of fun to be involved. The different types of industrial stuff and all that is all just kind of works its way through the system. But the administrative system, the administrator of the town, the zoning enforcement officer, and Patrice, they kind of filter it through first before we ever even see it. So they're the ones who recommend what goes through and what doesn't, and we work it that way. But it's a fun board. As far as time goes, you have to put it, they want you to do an 8-hour class once every couple of years, which is once you start learning about it, it's actually fun because it's all just case law, and they start throwing, it's a whole class of 8 lawyers, and they each specialize in something, and they throw you 6 different cases that you learn about what the law says you can and can't do, which was interesting. And then the Prague has a tendency to gather all this stuff that's going on in different towns, and they send you to that so you can read that to see what the other towns are doing. So you could spend 3 hours in the meeting, you could go to Prague, and you could spend another hour or 2 going through that, and then you got to go to the class. So it's not a lot of effort, but it's a great learning experience.
Great. Thank you all. And for those of you who are not familiar with CROG, it stands for Capital Region Council of Governments. It's our form of county government that we don't actually have here in Connecticut. So up next, I'm going to invite Ann Decker, who is chair of our Zoning Board of Appeals, to join us.
Okay, seats more.
Oh, sure.
Did you want to leave me out?
I just was not aware that you were on the board, but you are welcome to come join the panel if you would like.
I don't know if I should.
You should.
Sure.
Boy, I forget the RSVP.
For more, because I'm a Republican, it doesn't mean you leave me out. You gotta keep it to 5 minutes. What'd you say, Bob? You have to keep it to 5 minutes.
Yep, each person gets 2.5 minutes and I'm keeping track.
Thank you, John.
All right, well, I'll get started while Morris is making his way to his chair and we do the musical chairs. My name is Ann Decker. I am on Zoning Board of Appeals. I was first elected in 2017 in an alternate position. And I can't even remember when I was upgraded to a full board seat. I think it might have been 4 years ago, maybe. So I am now a full board member, and at the last meeting, I was elected chair. So I will be in that position until the election this fall. And at that point, we'll see who's left on the board and we'll, elect a chair at that point as well. So the next question is how much time per month? So Zoning Board of Appeals only meets when we have an application in front of us. So it might be one application a year, it might be 2 applications a year. Since I've been on the board, it's either been 0, 1, or 2 applications a year. So it is not a heavy time commitment board. When we do have an application in front of us, it's just a matter of reviewing the materials that we've been given ahead of time. We might need to, do some extra research on the side to find out how the application, fits with what we understand. And then going to the meeting and, deciding on the matter. So as far as what the board sees, what does an application mean? An application is someone who has gone through has gone through the zoning enforcement officer, so wants to do something with their property. And if they want to do something with their property and the zoning enforcement officer has said, no, you can't do this, they might appeal that decision and that appeal would come to us to decide. Or the zoning enforcement officer has asked that we decide on the matter itself. It might need a variance to what the current zoning laws allow. So it might be something regarding a setback from a property line. And we have to decide if that variance is allowed to happen. And the way we decide that is based on a hardship, whether it is something that is particular to a person's property and it cannot be, it can't be changed, and it is something that I don't know, where they need to put through for, the use of their property, and we need to decide if that's an allowable use.
Morris, anything to add about your involvement?
Want me to add to it?
Add to what Ann said. Got anything else?
My name is Morris Silverstein. I'm a lifelong resident. I'm closing in on 40 years of experience and exposure on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Our board is a board of relief, not a board of enforcement. The legislature established a Zoning Board of Appeals to give relief to property owners who have been unnecessarily burdened by the strict application of the zoning regulations. But it's been hard, believe me, over the years to get all members to embrace the fact that we are a board of relief. We're not a board of enforcement. And if they only could accept and think that way, our paths perhaps would have been a little easier through the years, but in any event, we're there to give relief to a property owner if they feel they've been unjustly been restricted by the zoning regulations.
Great, thank you very much. So up next, we have our Board of Assessment Appeals. We have Mary Terhune.
Good evening, everyone. Mary Terhune. I'm on the Board of Assessment Appeals, and this is the best board ever because we only meet twice a year. So remember that. So we meet in March, and we may schedule about 3 or 4 days of meetings, but it's all going to depend on how many appellants we have. That's at the time when people can appeal their assessments. They're not appealing taxes, they're not appealing taxes, they're appealing assessments. So if you feel that your assessment is incorrect and you've gone to the assessor and you're still unsatisfied, you can come to the Board of Assessment Appeals, and we have some powers and actions that the assessor may not be able to follow through on. So what we do is we hear the appellants, and it can be for real estate in March, it can be for motor vehicle assessments, or it can be for business personal property assessments. So we'll see all of those if we have them. And then we meet in September, and that is just for motor vehicles. That's because, people have their supplemental billing. There's just because the way that works, everybody gets another chance to appeal their motor vehicle assessments. And that would be in September. I'm relatively new on the board, but I really do enjoy it. Part of it is because I work for another municipality in an assessor's office. So I really, it's close to my heart as far as making sure that things are fair for people and accurate. And if they have some type of issue that needs to be addressed, if it's something that we all agree on, and typically we do make unanimous decisions. It's only a 3-person board, but we typically do all agree unanimously on our decisions. And again, we are a board of relief, but people do have to present their case as, an assessment appeal. It's not a tax appeal. It is an assessment appeal. Like I said, best board ever. So remember that, only meet twice a week. I mean, twice a year. And that's about it. Okay.
Great, thank you very much, Mary. So up next, I'm going to invite our registrars of voters. We have Bernice Dixon and Ross Lally, her deputy, who are going to join us up now. And Sandy, who's joining us online, if you want to chime in, please feel free.
Thank you.
Bunch of poll workers out in the audience.
Yes, we do. Okay, we are set. So I'm Bernice Dixon. Ross Lally is my deputy. Basically, we're here to educate people a little bit about what we do. I know a lot of people think registrar of voters is, well, we see you on election day and that's it. There's a lot more to it. First of all, even though we have labels on us, political labels, and you have to be a member of a political party to run, that is not how the office is run. It's very non-political, very bipartisan. We work very well together. Our loyalty is to the voters of the town and to keep the records straight and run the elections in an accurate manner, fair, efficiently, honest, all of those things. And so we keep that in mind all the time. It's like not even a problem in our office. So you just need to know that. But if you're of an unaffiliated party or not of the major parties, does not exclude you from working with us at the polls. Okay, so I just want to get that out there because a lot of people think, oh, they can't work at the polls because they're unaffiliated. That is not true. So even though there are laws that govern that on many of our positions, we need to have a Democrat and a Republican present together doing, conducting their duties. But we also can have other unaffiliated people working with us. Just as a point of information for those wondering how much time it takes. During an average week, when an election is not taking place, we can easily work 4 to 10 hours. During election time, we can work 20 hours in one day. So, and we do. And so, depending how many referendums there are, depending how many primaries may take place, that dictates our time spent working, okay? The other things, I mean, we could go on, but I just want you to know, just like the Board of Ed, we are governed by the state and by federal laws, more than we are by local laws. You can't really change the laws of the state and federal election laws. All right, and education is a big part of our job, continuing education. We have conferences, we have Zoom meetings, we have other classes, certification meetings. The other thing is, if you don't want to be a registrar, you can always become a moderator. We are short on moderators, and that again, you take classes and become a moderator, and the moderators are in charge of the election at each election. So there are many positions, many places that people can work in our office if they like. I'll end my part, and if Ross has anything to add, or Sandy. Sandy, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Bernice. That was a great introduction. I find that Bernice is carrying a large load here. If I work 4 hours a week, it's a lot. But there currently is an opportunity to for someone to become a deputy registrar on the Democratic side. So if you think you're interested, please reach out. As Bernice said, our office is very collegial. I feel like we are best friends in the office. And the work gets done with a smile and helpfulness. So I'm going to turn it over to Ross.
That doesn't leave me with a lot to say. But that's the thing I enjoy about it the most, is really just the, I can't even call it bipartisan. It's really nonpartisan, because the only time we ever have to look at politics is where a specific function defined by the state or federal government says you have to have a Democrat there and a Republican. Otherwise, we don't really know, and we don't really care, because our job is really to enforce the federal election laws, the state election laws, ensure that everybody who is entitled to vote can vote. And so we spend a lot of time keeping the voting records clean. We get regular reports of people who have deceased, people who move into town, people who move out of town, and we update the records to, reflect that. And again, the moderators have a really important job on the days of the election with making sure all the equipment is set up properly. The tabulators are, working correctly. The results are accurate, and they get reported correctly to the state. So it's fun. It's a lot of work during the election times. Again, I would just agree with the hours that, Bernice said. It's typically like 4 or so hours a week. And then with the elections, you're a moderator or one of the registrars, you wake up at 4, you're at the polling place at 5, and you're done either 11 o'clock or midnight. So we do need another deputy registrar for the Democrats. So just please, if your Argo's been interested, ask Mr. Toomey.
I was just gonna say,
And
if anybody wants to be the Democratic deputy registrar, give me a call.
And if I could just add one thing, we are not on the ballot this fall. The registrars appear on the ballot. We have 4-year terms and they coincide with the presidential ballots. So anybody thinking about it, you've got plenty of time to think about it and join us.
And I don't know if this was already stated, so if it was, I apologize, but these are paid positions. The poll workers get paid, registrars get paid. So most of the other boards we're talking about tonight are voluntary. So anybody looking for a part-time job, maybe you're just looking for a way to get engaged, but also need a way to make money.
It's paid by the hour that you work.
Right.
It's not a salary.
Exactly.
Right.
So yeah, paid poll workers, deputy registrars, registrar. So it's a little different than the other boards we've been talking about tonight. So I am going to ask Ross to stay up here and share a little bit with us about inland wetlands.
Okay, just pause for a second while I put on another hat. Get my mind out of the registrar's mode and into inland wetlands. So again, that's where I got started in getting involved in, the town government. I moved into Bolton and previously I had lived in Waterford and then got divorced and spent about 10 years in apartments and didn't really get involved in politics. But then once I got, into town and settled in, that was where I started, inland wetlands, because I'd spent about 11 or 12 years doing that down in Waterford. And inland wetlands, in Bolton, we've separated inland wetlands and conservation. So conservation is more of the education and advocacy side, and the inland wetlands is the regulatory side. So I'm going to just, talk about inland wetlands as the regulatory side. And the best way to describe us is as creatures of the statutes of the state of Connecticut. We exist to implement those statutes in our inland wetlands regulations and enforce, those regs that implement those statutes. And I just want to clarify, lots of people think our job is to prevent development, and that is not the case. Our job is to make sure that development, where it is appropriate, occurs with the least, environmental impact. So we're not here to stop development. Sometimes that just happens because, you just can't fit it in with what you want to do on this property based on the regs that we work within and the statutes. But again, just want to make that clear, because I sometimes get asked like, oh, if somebody wanted to build something on this piece of land, could you stop them? And I can't really answer until they come before us and we look at the particulars of what they do, but I can't say that our job is to stop development. So just to clarify a little bit about it, the way typically is when you get a project going, we have some very good cooperation among, the zone between planning and zoning and inland wetlands. In our land use office here, a developer will come in or a private citizen come in and say, I want to do this, that, or the other thing with a piece of land. They will take a look at it, find out if there are wetlands on it. If there are wetlands on it, then it will come to the inland, wetlands commission as an application. And you pay a fee, you come before us either personally or with your representative, who could be an architect, could be a lawyer, could be both, and, present your plan to us. And then we look at that and we'll make a determination. We typically have to make a determination within 60 days, but we can't do it at the first meeting because people need a chance, the public needs a chance to comment. So typically it'll be presented to us 1 month. And then we will make a decision by the next month, assuming that we have all the information that we need to make that decision. So that's one thing that we do. The other thing we do is called the jurisdictional determination. Because there's some things that are covered by inland wetland regs and there's some things are not. And some of those things that are not are like farming activities, agricultural activities. You want to build a farm on your property. You want to conduct forestry. And you might just want to cut down a couple of trees for the use and maintenance and enjoyment of your property. And if you're work fits in that category and a couple of other things, the activity you're proposing, you come before us. Say, here's what I want to do. I don't think this is a regulated activity. What do you know, and you make your case for that. You can't just assume that you want to, it is an unregulated activity or an activity permitted as of right. You really have to come before us. And then we make that determination. So there's usually a lower level of proof required as far as what you bring for materials, because why go through all that work if you wind up not having to, need a permit? If you do, then we ask for that, the permit and, that higher level of detail. So I think that pretty much sums it up. And again, we meet once a month. And typically for an hour to 2 hours, there might be a little bit more work if we have to do a site walk or something like that. But it's typically an hour to a month. And sometimes we don't meet at all for a couple of months because there just isn't anything.
Awesome. Thank you, Ross. And that is a good segue into our Conservation Commission. And so I'd like to invite Alan Bicknell to come join us.
Hello. I'm Alan Bicknell. I've been in town for like 10 years. I've been on the Conservation Commission for 4 years. I was just reinstated. I'm actually from Ellington, so I haven't gone too far from home. But one of the things that is really interesting to me about Bolton is that the resources, the natural resources that we have here are just amazing. For just the geology is just really very impressive. The history, the whole notch thing. People have been going through that notch for at least probably 5,000 years, for instance. It's the old Mishi-Mayagat, the old road between Albany and Boston, as it turns out. Strange. We also are at the height of land. So there's 3 different watersheds that originate right here at the notch, right here in Bolton, the Salmon River, the going down towards Vernon into the Tankerhooston River, into the Connecticut, and then of course going the Hop River going into the Thames River. So we are really at a juncture of really important natural resources that we feel that we need to protect and oversee and monitor. And so that's one of our big, things that we do. We watch the parks, we maintain the, cleanliness. And fortunately, the parks are actually pretty good. We're actually, people generally, not always or everywhere, but people generally are really respectful of the parks. And so that's a good thing. As far as we also work with various towns. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about the rare Atlantic white cedar forest up in the Coventry and Tolland, and a little bit in Vernon. It's very unusual. It's on Upper Bolton Lake. And so we're working with the towns around there, Coventry, Tolland, and Vernon, to monitor it. There was recently a beaver dam was sort of like altered so that the beavers can still do their thing without flooding, the road, for instance. And so there's like a special gate we have there. So we do that sort of thing. We also travel to various conferences. The Kakiwik Conference is the big one. That's where Rod, the chairman, is not here today because he had a meeting, a conflict. Kakiwik is the Connecticut Association of Conservation and Inland Wetland Commissions. And so we work with them. They have a big event once a year. As far as the amount of time that we spend on the Conservation Commission, we have a meeting once a month, generally, occasionally twice a month, or occasionally a special meeting, particularly around the photo contest that we run. And I hope you've all at least had a chance to look at the catalogs that we produce. Those are all people from town, or the photographs are all from town, but you don't have to be a town person to enter the contest and get prizes. And that sort of thing. So, yes. Oh, yeah, with the hikes that we take, they're all kind of themed hikes. So we have like a vernal pools hike in the springtime. Interestingly, up on top where the flag is, there's a vernal pool up there. It defies definition of the vernal pool, but still a vernal pool because there's a tiny little outlet, but it's so high that it doesn't really drain, which is interesting. And no fish can be up there. So it's full of all sorts of really rare and arguably endangered, salamanders, frogs, even fairy shrimp, which I didn't even know that we had fairy shrimp, but they're like about that big. And they look just like shrimp, freshwater shrimp. So that's it. And then we recently, we're working in the Nathan Hale Greenway to monitor that and try to set that up. And we've had once again, we have our hikes that are themed hikes. The most recent one was the National Hike Day. And we had this guy, Matt Largess, he's known as a tree hugger. He's quite famous, and he just tries to protect and point out the importance of having old growth forest in town, because they, as it turns out, the bigger the trees are, the more they absorb CO2, carbon dioxide. So they're actually much better sponges to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Alan. That was, I learned something during that segment. I might have to join the vernal pool then. I've been up there, I have not encountered a pool, but I often don't go up there because I'm afraid I'm gonna fall. So, all right, last but not least, we have Rhea Klein, who's gonna come up and talk about Heritage Farm. She missed that part of the email, but she can talk about the Heritage Farm Commission all day, so I know she can do it off the cuff.
All day. I love the farm.
Come closer so they can hear you.
All right, Bolton Heritage Farm, as I said, I've been on the farm commission for, I'd say, 6 years now. And that's thanks to Arlene Theano, who's our co-chair, our chairperson. And it's really my passion. We've had different members, and sometimes we do have openings, and I'd say it's a great commission to work on. What we're trying to do is to preserve the farm and its buildings, and to help the town. And we are a branch of the town, so whatever we do, we have to go through the Board of Selectmen to have it approved. And we meet once a month. It's usually like an hour and a half meeting-ish, maybe it'll go over a little bit. And we do meet almost every month. And then we have little workshops just to get things done, because we have Christmas fairs, and we're always trying to raise money for our projects. And we also sponsor events. So for example, I have a yoga program. It's in August, every Monday in August, and it's yoga on the farm. And I instruct the yoga participants, and it's a donation only. So whatever money we make goes directly to the preservation account.
I'll vouch for the yoga. I've done it.
Yeah, it's great because it's on the beautiful grass, which is always cut by the maintenance crew here, and it's just wonderful. And then we also were, for example, we're having the first weekend of October, we're having a living history reenactment, which is going to be the soldiers that are going to be French soldiers, and they're going to encamp at the farm. So we're looking forward to that. There's going to be an archaeological dig in July with students from France and America. We have one student from Bolton who's going to be participating. So these are the kinds of things we're always working on to create activities, enjoyment on the farm, and to raise money to preserve the farm, and we write grants. So we've been pretty successful with writing grants, and we also have plans for really improving the farm. So it's just a lot of fun, I have to say, and I'll do it for as long as I can, but we do look for people from time to time to sit on the commission, and it's an appointed commission. And so it's you just have to be appointed, you don't have to run, and it has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you very much. So, Rhea just brought up a good point. Some of the boards that we talked about this evening are elected boards, and some of them are appointed, right? Just like some of the positions were paid and some of them are voluntary. And so if you have any questions about that, please feel free to ask folks. So we are at the point of our program where we are opening it up for Q&A. Adam, if you could pass the bucket behind you. I don't know if anybody had questions. Please feel free to stick a card in the bucket. If there are no questions, then I have one that someone had asked me prior to the event. So maybe.
Maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with that. So, and Michael, who's online, has a question. So let's start with Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My interest would be with either the Inland Wetland or the Conservation Commission. As far as the inland wetland, do the commission members, are they responsible for wetland delineation, enforcement of wetland permanent activities, or is there somebody the town hires to do all the inspection and enforcement?
So is Inland Wetlands responsible for enforcement and inspection, or is there someone that's hired to do that?
So we actually,
Sorry.
I get told to move back up and talk to the owl. Give me a second.
Yeah.
It's like talk to the head. So anyway, good question. We actually in Bolton hire a wetlands agent who is responsible for actually going out and working with the applicants, collecting information and then coming back to the commission. The wetlands agent is also the person who goes out and does the enforcement. We currently do not have any fine structure set up in Bolton as part of the enforcement, but what we can do is get a cease and desist order and ask the person to come before the commission to explain why they are doing what they are doing and have a discussion with us as to why that can continue or why it has to stop and what they have to do to, fix things. And if we do need to go further with that, we have the option to take them to court, over, remediation and so forth. Does that answer your question, or is there more to it?
No, that answers it, because I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure if you clearly stated roughly how much time you spend a month.
As I said, it's about 2 hours a month. There's a meeting once a month, runs an hour to 2 hours. I, as the chair, sometimes will meet for, half hour or so on and off during the week with our wetlands agent. But that's about it. And we haven't actually met for the last 3 months because there have been no applications coming before us for any developments that are impacting wetlands.
Okay, is it common to have a hostile issue with an applicant, or is it something that's rare?
It's actually quite rare. It's
Good.
most.
That's what I wanted to hear.
It's not that we, we're pushovers or anything. It's just really the applicants just understand what we're looking for in advance. And it's made very clear with their chats with, the meetings that they have with planning and zoning and with the wetlands agent as to what the requirements are. So it's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just jump into that? Let's do it from here. When the town does undertake enforcement agent through either zoning enforcement officer or through the wetlands agent, it's the town doing the enforcing, and the town takes that process over. If it goes to court or if there's an appeal, it's the town that's, and usually through the town council or through a retained attorney that would prosecute it. It's not the commission itself typically.
Yeah, correct. I'm just saying for the typical stuff for cease and desist and that part up to the point of enforcement going to court. And then, like you said, then the town takes over with its attorney. Right. Thanks for the clarification.
Oh, so just to follow up with that then, so if an applicant decided to take the town to court, the board members wouldn't be personally sued or be forced to go to litigation. It would be the town, correct?
No, the town attorney, or in rare cases, the town would retain an attorney specifically to defend the action or to carry out. In fact, we just finished one of those, so.
Yeah, because it's just like, if I'm going to volunteer for something, that's not something I would like to volunteer for, so.
Now, I mean, with the issues that we have, I have never, no board member with the 12 years that I've been on it, we have never with any of the issues had to appear in court or have, give testimonies. Typically, as Adam said, the town's attorney, especially hired attorney, and sometimes our, agent for the wetlands agent, they give testimony, but that's typically it.
Okay, thank you.
Glad to hear you're potentially, considering joining a board. That's
Yes,
that's why we're doing this event. So that's great to
Go
hear.
take the next step and talk to your town committee chair and,
Yep.
and, it's an appointed position. I should also add to this. Inland Wetlands is appointed by Board of Selectmen after a recommendation from one of the town committees.
Right,
You can
so
apply online.
so for appointed positions, there is under, I believe on the website, on each page, if you scroll down to the bottom, there is a link to an application. That would go, to the town, but you would want to go through the Democratic town chair or the Republican town chair. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're unaffiliated or independent, you can approach either of those chairs for consideration.
Or you can just submit the form.
Or you can just submit the form apparently to the town to be appointed to the board. So that would be the process.
Yeah, and the only thing to add to that is for any of these appointed ones, you have to have a certain balance between the parties on them. So that sometimes affects whether somebody can, no matter how qualified they are and how much they want to serve, they may not be able to just because of the balance that we have
Right.
to maintain by state law on the
Yeah,
different commissions.
minimum representation laws. So thank you, Ross, for that dialogue
Do you
with.
need me yet?
Nope, we're good.
Am I done?
Right now. You can stay if you want. So we do have a comment from one of our attendees. So impressed by the Conservation Commission, Alan, and what they're involved in. I learned so much from the presentation. Great job. And that's from Diane in our audience. So thank you for that. I believe this one is asking, where would they go to ask about handicap parking? Is that inappropriate? So what committee or what board or commission would discuss handicapped parking and the need for it or accessibility of?
Well, you got zoning.
Yeah.
But
You have to-
well, you guys can answer zoning, but.
Well, if it's in a private location, that would just be the landowner, because
Yeah.
those spots are identified at the time a site plan is approved. And there have to be a certain number of them, and once it's approved, that's, if they're eliminated without approval.
Here.
There isn't one here.
Okay, if I'm just talking private property. If they're eliminated without approval, you would go to the zoning enforcement officer to try to ask why they were eliminated, because that would be a violation of site plan. If it's town property, the people to talk to would either be the town administrator or the Board of Selectmen, or both. And I would urge people who do make contact with the town staff, who don't get a response in a reasonably soon time, to email a member of the Board of Selectmen or email the Board of Selectmen directly and ask that it be addressed.
And I might add that at elections, whether they're on private property, town property, whatever the registrars take care of that. So that there are spaces, and we also have curbside voting for those that need it during election, and we designate an area for that. So that's depends. Here it is.
Oh, okay. So I did get something from someone saying that maybe we could list off some of the other commissions that we have. So we did have to narrow our list down to only 10 for tonight. I did get asked like, why isn't this one on and why isn't that one on? And it's probably because we're all waiting to go home and eat dinner, quite frankly. But we do have the Historic Commission, right? And John's as a historian here. We had an ad hoc diversity commission. We already.
Library board, we have
Yep.
cemetery
Who's gonna come?
commission, we have veterans commission.
You have a park commission, you also have a seniors.
And the senior.
Seniors is a new one. The veterans is a new one this year.
And there's Justice of the Peace, the Republicans have 6. The Democrats have 6 and unaffiliated voters have 6.
So for those who may or may not have heard, he was talking about justice of the peace and that there are 6 per party for the town. So, I mean, I was gonna say at the end that if there was an interest in learning about those other boards and commissions that we were unable to get you tonight, we can consider pulling together an event to discuss those other boards and commissions. So we'll see what folks say. If there's interest, I'm sure we'd be happy to pull something like that together because we just couldn't get to all of them tonight. And then the question that I had that was asked from me in advance is, what kind of process do the boards go through to make their decisions? We heard a lot tonight about how they end up coming to unanimous decisions, but what does that process look like?
Well, since I have to leave, I'd like to get my statement in. And the owl can see me from here and can respond. I'll speak on the Board of Selectmen because I've been on it for 30 some odd years. It is a discussion amongst the board members, and it truly is a discussion. And I say that because no matter what the makeup of the board is, no matter if it swings Republican, Democrat, it becomes a discussion between the members as citizens of the town of Bolton. And in all the years I've been there, everyone there has acted in that manner. And the process is, what do you feel, if you studied this thing, is the best solution for the town? And that wraps it up in a nutshell. And that is done. If someone came to this town from the West Coast, viewed a meeting of any of these boards, and you asked them who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, they wouldn't tell you that. Because decisions are made on a bipartisan basis, period. I mean, you may feel like some way it's when you go left or right, but I would say 99.9%, they are simply made that way. And if a person who has interest in what goes on there has, for example, Board of Selectmen, you feel I'd like to speak on this, we always provide an opportunity to do that. You can always speak to one of the board members and they can present that. And I think this form of government is probably one of the few forms of government that is open. It is as open as it is. And the way you do it, the people, you talk to the people in this room or other members of the board, and they can help you. They always will. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Amanda.
Yep.
I just want to say a couple things about the way boards work and make decisions. I was chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission for 5 years, and I was on the commission for 20. Every important decision the Planning and Zoning Commission makes is made after a public hearing with public notice. There will be a sign on the property, there will be a newspaper ad, and it will be listed on an agenda as to when the public hearing is. And often those public hearings will go for 2 nights, one night and then another month later. And in between that time, if anybody has information and can't make it to a public hearing, they can submit it for questions in writing. With the boards now, since the pandemic, most of the boards that have public hearings will do them in a hybrid way, so that you can even just log in from home and speak at a public hearing. And I speak as somebody who was on that board for 20 years. We were overjoyed to have more than one person speak at a public hearing because it meant that we were getting more than one viewpoint. And that is probably the biggest problem for all of the boards. We're all volunteers. We go to work, we come home, we eat our dinner, we go to a meeting. We don't necessarily have an ability to poll our neighbors to find out, hey, what do you think about this? So if there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, and my God forbid, there should be 10. That's very meaningful to people on a volunteer board. Number one, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, I have the same exact feeling. We have a public public forum moment at the beginning of every meeting. Once again, they're all hybrid. When the way we know that something's important to people is that somebody shows up or logs in and says something to us at a public forum moment. Because otherwise, unless we get an email from you or a letter, or this is not a town where people are demonstrating outside the town hall for things. So if you don't tell us that something is important to you, we don't know. And the best way to do that is either show up at one of the meetings or even just send us an email to let us know that something on our agenda is important to you or something that should be on our agenda. We've had somebody, for example, come to the last 3 Board of Selectmen meetings talking about the town hall and how it needs to be addressed and how it's no longer, this is 21st century and it's a 18th century, 19th century building. And that keeps that in our minds and it's important. I do echo what Bobby said. I mean, this is a small town. We're all neighbors. The people who are on boards make a concerted effort to be civil and to talk things out rather than to have an issue, a personal issue. And we do that when people come, even if we disagree very strongly with what they say to us, we try to treat people with that kind of respect and neighborliness, because this is a community that we serve on these boards because we care about it. Believe me, the pay of a selectman is about $1,500 a year. The first selectman gets $15,000. Everybody else gets nothing or almost nothing. Maybe they get a cup of coffee once in a while. But there's a reason people do this for you and for this community. It's because we care about how it comes out. And that's what we're looking. The purpose of this meeting or this forum was to try to encourage people to join these boards, either on an appointed basis or on an elected basis, or fill a vacancy, because every once in a while a vacancy comes up in the middle of a term and you could just get appointed if you were interested in it. Or if you've run for it before and didn't get on, you could get appointed. And that's how most of us got to be involved, is that we filled a vacancy or we ran and didn't make it and then ran again and got on. And that is, it is one of the joys and privileges of living in a small town like this, that if you raise your hand, you will be called to serve. It's kind of like when you go to school at Bolton High and you want to play a sport. If you show up to the first meeting, you will play, because they have to have you. There's not enough of us. So please join us.
I thought I was special.
Kristen, did you want to respond to the question?
I do. Something that's been a little bit different for the Board of Finance, and I think it's important to note, especially because it is in a state of transition into a committee. That historically what we've done, if you've sat in a Board of Finance meeting, as opposed to sitting in on a Board of Selectmen meeting or even a Board of Education meeting, you're going to notice that we run and we make our decisions a little different, because we are working with the other 2 boards and we are continually asking questions, and not even just during budget season, throughout the entire year. And that's just part of the diligence of the board. So may seem like it's a little bit more free moving between the boards that we're interacting with, but it's a very important process so that we can gain the depth of understanding, especially if it requires some type of cut or just justification for why something is, why there might be an expense or why there may be additional revenue. So we need to have those answers. Again, it's in a state of transition. I'm not sure what that's going to look like with the committee, because hopefully it will be a little bit more smooth flowing, because you're going to have members from the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen and 3 at large from the Board of Finance. So that should be interesting to see how that process changes, because it is going to evolve. The other thing is, and I have to add on to what Adam said, it's been invaluable to us on the Board of Finance during budget season to have that participation. Why? Because there are so many different perspectives and we can't see all of them. We're just 7 people. So when you come out and you express, why you feel the way you do, that helps us. And we use that information and take it into consideration with our decisions. And they're not easy decisions. So I want everybody to be aware of that. But your thoughts, your input, it is invaluable. So please don't stop participating. Tell friends and neighbors, we are more than willing to listen, especially if there's confusion within just even reading the budget, because we've gotten a lot of questions on that and anything we can do to help improve. Even though, again, it's going to be a different situation with the committee, people are going to want to hear your feedback on that.
So the message is we are overjoyed, whether I'm on inland wetlands or whether, Board of Finance, we are overjoyed to have the public input. And, we do things by vote. It's a simple majority on both finance, Board of Finance and on inland wetlands. We also, with some things, will have public hearings. It depends on the nature of what we're going to do, but they're all noted in the, either the agendas that are posted, or if it's a public hearing, there's a notice that has to go out 10 days before. And that will be, posted in various, like typically the Journal Inquirer and on the town, website. But it's really important to get, people involved. And you also can show it through voting too, because that's the same thing with the budget, the way it is currently determined by the voters is it's a simple majority. You need one, you need one more saying yes than saying no to pass the budget. So every vote does count. And that's another way you show your involvement, whether it's with the budget, whether it's who you want as a office holder. So I can't state any more strongly is like, show up at our meetings, please. We love you. We want you there. We value the input, and also please vote and register to vote so you can vote.
Great.
I have cards with me if anybody has some chances in registering.
Well, thank you so much. It is about 3 minutes to 8, so I am gonna wrap us up and keep us on time because I'm sure there are folks that have not had dinner yet. I did just want to wrap up by reiterating that we are currently headed into election season. So what that means is that both the Democratic Town Committee and Republican Town Committee are looking for candidates for the elected boards that we talked about tonight. The appointed boards, if there are vacancies available, you can find them on the website. All of the people that are currently filling any position, when their terms come up, that is posted on the website, so you can look at that at any time. If you're considering running for office, it's not that scary. No experience is required. Just consider, where would your time and talents best be utilized? What do you have an interest in? What do you think you can contribute to? Again, reiterating, you can absolutely learn on the job. And like Juan was mentioning earlier, you have, a village around you to help teach you how to do things, right? So if you are interested in running for anything, please reach out to anybody who's involved in the Republican Town Committee or Democratic Town Committee, unaffiliated and independent folks. We are looking for everybody to get involved. We want this to be an inclusive process here in Bolton because we need the brain power of everybody involved. I'd like to take time to thank those that helped me plan the event tonight. And then to all of our panelists who have been here, this is just another, hour or two out of their day that they are taking voluntarily to give back to the town. So please give a hand to the panelists and thank you all for coming out tonight.
And thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you to those who joined us online. Take care. Have a good night.
Let Rodney know or myself know if they want to run.